Hey everybody, welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. Every year we like to do a calendar blanket, and every year we like to make them a little bit differently. This year is no exception. So we thought we would take the opportunity today to introduce you to the 2019 Jayda InStitches calendar blanket. As any of you know who have done a blanket with us in the past, we like to reveal a little surprise about the blanket each month as we go. And we're going to do the same thing this year, but we also know that from previous blanket builds that a lot of you worry that you're not going to have the right supplies on hand, or you're wondering if there's something you could pre-order so that you're ready to go for the next blanket installment. So we thought we'd do something a little bit differently this year, and because this blanket is a little bit different, we're going to talk to you today about some of the supplies you're going to need to have on hand in order to get started. First, let's talk about yarn. It's kind of our favorite thing, right? So I'm going to tell you the supplies that I will be using this year. You do not have to use the same brands or the same colors as me, but I know a lot of you like to try and get something that's very similar, so I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to be using. And I'm also going to show you how I'm going to be intermixing them. So I'm going to talk about brands, I'm going to talk about fiber, and I'm going to talk about yarn weight. We're going to be using 100% acrylic yarn for this project. It's relatively inexpensive and it's fairly easy for us to lay our hands on. So that's my chosen fiber. We're also going to use a worsted weight, also known as a medium weight, or a size 4 weight yarn. If you're wondering what that looks like on a label, that right there, that size 4, that's the weight of the yarn, and that is the weight that we're going to be using throughout this blanket. So the entire blanket will be constructed using a 100% acrylic size 4 worsted weight yarn. There are a lot of different brands on the market. Typically, I have access to Bernat or Red Heart, sometimes Loops and Threads, and even occasionally Mary Maxim brands of yarn. Well, if it's 100% acrylic, they all play together very nicely. So I'm going to show you some of the yarns that I've got on hand that I will be using in the blanket. For starters, I've got a couple of Red Hearts. So this is a Red Heart Super Saver. It's a size 4. This is a Red Heart Comfort, also a size 4. Sometimes the Comfort is a little bit thicker, marginally so, than the Super Savers, but they play together nicely, and so I would recommend interchanging them if you have them on hand. So you can use a little bit of the Red Heart Super Saver or a little bit of the Comfort. You can make it all using Comfort or all using Super Saver. That's perfectly okay. Then there's Bernat. Bernat has a product called Super Value. They also have one called Premium. They're both worsted weight, 100% acrylic yarn, size 4, and they also play nicely with the Red Heart. So if you have access to the Super Values or the Premium, you can use these ones as well. I will be interchanging these in with the rest of the Red Heart. And one more. I also have some Mary Maxim. It is also 100% acrylic, it's worsted weight, it is exactly the same size as the rest of the yarns. Doesn't matter that it's Mary Maxim, it will still play nicely with the rest of them. So the point here is, as long as the fibers are all the same and the weight is all the same, then all of those yarns are perfectly acceptable for this project. Next, let's talk yarn color. All right, you are going to need 2 blues, 2 greens, and a brown to get started with this project. You need a light blue and a dark blue. You need a light green and a dark green. And you need 1 brown. Doesn't matter what kind. So you could use this sky blue, light blue as your light blue, and your dark blue could be this sort of periwinkle color. Or you could use a very dark blue, like this royal or navy blue color I have here, as your dark blue. Alternatively, that could be your dark blue and the periwinkle could be your dark blue. Or I should say your light blue. You need a light and a dark. It doesn't matter what shades, you just want them to be obviously different. So one is obviously a light blue and one is obviously a dark blue. Same thing goes for the greens. I have a light green and a dark green. You can tell that one's light and one's dark. So they're not so close in shade that you can't really discern which one's which, but they're not extreme either. However, if you have a really dark green and a really light green, you can use those too. It's entirely up to you. Don't worry, whatever colors you choose will look just fine in this project. And brown. I have a nice chocolate brown. This is the brown I'm going to be using. This is Coffee by Red Heart Super Saver, but you could use a lighter brown or a darker brown than the one I have here. It doesn't matter. So what I'm saying is, if you go to your local yarn store and your color selections are somewhat limited, all you really need to worry about are shadings. A light blue and a dark blue, a light green and a dark green, and a brown, doesn't matter what color. How much yarn are you going to need to get started? Well, this is a big part of the blanket, these greens and the blues and the brown. So to be safe, you're going to want approximately 200 grams of each color. So 200 grams of light blue, 200 grams of dark blue. The same for the light green and the dark green, and the same for the brown. That translates to, so if this is approximately a 200 gram ball of yarn, that's about 364 yards. So if you tend to use yardage more when you're guesstimating for a project, then you want to aim for 364 yards of each color. Now, having said that, if you are a loose crocheter, you might want to get an extra ball of yarn, just to be on the safe side in case you run out. If you're a tight crocheter, then those amounts should be just fine for you. One more thing, if you only have access to DK weight yarn, you can use DK weight yarn for this project, that's perfectly fine. DK weight, also known as double knitting weight, is sometimes a little bit thinner. So it still sits in the size 4 medium weight category, but it's generally a little bit lighter than the standard Western worsted weight size. So the typical Red Heart or Bernat, that 4 is a bit thicker than a DK 4. So if you're going to use DK, because that's all you can get your hands on, it's perfectly fine, but don't be surprised if your blanket is a little bit smaller than the actual overall dimensions of the one made using the slightly thicker yarn. It's okay, it's not a problem, and you can make up for that missing size when we put the border on at the end of the project. All right, and let's talk hook. What hook size are you going to need for this project? I'm going to be using a 5.5 millimeter hook. This is also known as an I or a 9 in the US, and I think it's also known as a size 5 in the UK. So a 5.5 millimeter. That is a very medium-sized hook. It plays nicely with a medium-sized weight, so that's the hook choice for this project. And the gauge I'll be using later on will be based on this size 4 yarn and this 5.5 millimeter hook that I'm using. Having said that, once again, if your gauge is a little bit off because your yarn tends to be smaller or your hook is a little bit different or even your tension varies from mine, it's okay. Gauge isn't a super important factor in this project. How big is this blanket going to be? This blanket is going to be 36 inches or 90 centimeters wide by 48 inches or 120 centimeters tall before the border. So when we add the border at the end, it will give it more width and more height. And we're going to set the border up so that if you want your blanket to be a little bit bigger, you can vary the sizing on the border. And I think that's really important because a work of art needs a nice frame. And of course, you're going to need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle, basic supplies, the kind of things we usually use around here for a project. So that's the yarn, that's the hook size, those are the basic supplies, that's what you're going to need in order to get started with this 2019 calendar blanket. The first tutorial for the blanket will be coming very soon, and during the build of this blanket there will be lots of opportunities for you to dive into your stash and use up bits of yarn that you might have lying around the house, and we will review those as we go throughout the year, and we are both so excited about this project. We hope you guys will be too. So that's it for now. We will see you guys really soon with the first tutorial for the blanket, and until then, stay safe, stay crafty, have fun getting all of your supplies together, and we'll see you shortly. Bye guys!